we are Boober. So we're going to talk a bit about our game. DeMarco, Jonathan, Eric, Josh. And we originally came up with the idea, we're doing like waves, and then I think it was local lore. And we thought like, hey, let's do something pizza related. And then we heard two other groups doing something. So like, all right, what else can we look at? So we looked at kind of like the deep history. There's a lot of like spooky stuff, a lot of ghost stuff. So we're like, oh, okay. We found the story of a girl named Resurrection Mary, who's like this ghost that haunts like I guess this highway, and basically she weighs people down and they pick them up, and she has to be dropped off at a graveyard, and then she kind of disappears when she's there. So like, all right, let's make an idea out of that. So from there we created Boober, where you are transporting ghosts to their final resting place. So first, we started with a big old whiteboard, and we just kind of wrote stuff down. We didn't really know exactly what we were doing. It was just very early prototype. And we switched to pen and paper, and we kind of made it like co-op from there, which you'll see soon. Then we made a big old board, which we got rid of later. Kind of implemented that, and then finally we've got like our final thing, which we very minimalized, got rid of a lot of things. So the very first time we play tested this, it was exclusively a single player game with one person playing it, and then I guess one of us being like the AI or like the ghosts. We had 3 different graveyards, and it was easy enough. You picked up a ghost, talk to them a bit, move, and then drop them off, and you just repeated that. It was very simple, very straightforward. It was fun, but like I feel like on our second iteration, we needed more, so we wanted to create a co-op experience, because being a ghost was actually pretty fun, and we wanted to have our players experience that too. So we got 2 people playing it that weren't people from our group, and we made like a question deck, so the driver could ask questions to the ghosts, and the ghosts had fun ways to answer, like drawing, acting, making sounds, or like messing with objects. And then we kind of nailed down a lot of those for our final playtest and our final game, but this is kind of like where most of our ideas really started. Yeah, the movement and the core mechanics were left untouched at this point. It was still pretty basic.
So when we moved on to iteration 3, we got a prettier prototype. We kind of fleshed out like a board. We took like what we got from the notebook, and we just kind of implemented it into a board. We added a new graveyard. The core mechanics of the game were left relatively unchanged, and the players at the end of this now received a rating on how well they performed. This rating was affected by their correctness and the number of turns it took to arrive at their destination. So iteration 3 was just kind of taking what we did in iteration 2 and just kind of maybe expanding on it a little bit because we liked our idea. But iteration 4 was when we were questioning our existence. Iteration 4, we really wanted to focus on making the driver more fun, because everybody that played our game said that playing as the ghost was the best experience for our game, because you got to be goofy, you got to act out, you got to make fun noises. It was just a better time altogether. So we wanted to implement more decisions for the driver to make on the board. So we added restaurants and restrooms, which would let you swap out your question cards, or event spaces that would randomly trigger like things that can like help you or like mess up your game. Just kind of trying to focus on making the driver a little bit more fun. We rearranged the locations for balance reasons, and we added a new graveyard. This class session we also experimented a little bit. We got a suggestion to make our game a 2v2 competitive party game. Fast-paced, which meant like no conversations with the ghosts. It's just question, answer, get as many ghosts to as many graveyards as possible. No movement on the board. It was just it was a very different experience than what we were shooting for originally. We didn't particularly like the 2v2 aspect of the game, but we did one thing we did take out of that like experiment is that people seem to like the fast-paced nature of the game a lot better. So we made sure to take that feedback and incorporate it into our 5th decision. And the best way that we figured out to make our game a little bit more faster paced was just getting rid of the board altogether. So in iteration 5, we got ourselves a happy ending.
Oh my god.
focused on making the game a two-player cooperative experience. We removed the board entirely, and we added art. And people seem to really enjoy this iteration. We had people like stick around with our playtests, and yeah, we were just really happy with how it ended up. And then the art, I drew like a bunch of ghosts that were on the cards and everything.
Wow.
It took a while, and then like obviously like the graveyards I had to draw, and that's just like the players just put the car on the graveyard that they thought the ghost belonged to, and they'd move on to the next ghost. Very simple. This is just kind of how it ended up looking in the end. But we did learn quite a bit from our experiences, and Jonathan's going to tell you about.
Alright, so had some ups and downs with this project. One of the biggest good sides to it was we met our design goal. We wanted to make a game that was fun yet uncomfortable, because if you ever like just try to have some conversations in your car, you can get uncomfortable at times. And according to what our playtester said, we definitely achieved that design goal. We managed to get rid of the board, which was something we were really shooting for near the end game, near the end of this project, because it was just really messing up the pacing. Because it was, you know where you wanted to bring your ghost in like the first turn, and then you just waste 3 turns or 2 turns trying to get them to that graveyard. So getting rid of the board just made it a lot more fast-paced. It made it perfect, and people really liked the old car. And we also did a good job of making the ghost fun to play. Like what Marco was saying earlier about how we had, how you had to like act out the answers, or our favorite, sounding out what you're wearing. It was challenging, but yet it was something that people really enjoyed to do, or really liked doing. And then there's the bad side. What was it? Once players in a lot of our iterations, once players figured out a strategy, difficulty became a problem because it was just easier for everyone. Rule sheet, we try to minimize it, just keep the core of what each player was supposed to do, but no matter what, it continuously was wordy. And then no matter what we tried, we just could not manage to make the driver as fun as we made the ghost. But still managed to make both sides pretty fun.
Alright, so overall, what we learned was a lot of stuff. Some were surprises, some were a bit more intentional things that we set out to learn, but in the end, we got a pretty good wealth of knowledge out of it. The first thing was tailoring to our design goal. Once we had that set where we wanted to sort of emulate the awkward experiences, talking with Uber drivers if a conversation were to happen, we kind of had to go through a bunch of ideas and figure out how do we get awkward conversations, how do we get conversations started, how do we make that a game, and then how do we make that fun. And both our game and our design goal went through a couple of iterations, and we ended up figuring out one that we like and we wanted to stick with, and we could come up with a bunch of ideas to then tailor around that design goal, which was extremely helpful, and we can use that for future games that we all work on. Say we want to make a game that's scary, now we know how to sort of tailor that, and so on and so forth. We also learned how to make multiplayer games, because our initial idea, where we were sort of heading the Ghost AI in a way, was not working, and we figured that out sort of immediately. So most of the process was figuring out how to make this a fun multiplayer game. It involved balance, it involved simple rules so that people weren't confused, and clear rules as well so that people knew what would happen during some unique cases, because you don't know what's going to happen between two people that are just having a conversation. There's tons of variety that can happen. And then game balance was another thing that we learned. A constant problem, like we've been mentioning, was the fact that the Ghost was way, way, way more fun than the driver was, because the driver would just pick and choose where to go, and especially in the cases with the board for a game, it was just sort of sitting there and waiting to get to the destination, and that's just like turn after turn after turn, and just doing the same thing. While the Ghost is, jumping around and drawing stuff and making weird sounds, so we had to figure out kind of strange ways to get that balance just right. And so what's to come? We know what our current problems are with the game. Like I mentioned earlier, the driver is our biggest problem. We also have a fairly short-ish game. And so we are going to tackle those problems and fix them in a way that will hopefully create a more balanced game, create a longer game, and a more simple game that people can understand much more quickly. A lot of our other issues were people not understanding the rules quite off the bat. It would take a couple ghosts to go through, and then they would figure out like, oh, okay, this is what I have to do, this is how the game sort of flows, but it wasn't as immediate as we wanted it to be. And then also, we're just going to add more to the game. We have a ton of ghosts already, we have a ton of graveyards already, and we have a lot of answer cards and a lot of question cards, but that's easily expandable. We can add many more questions, many more responses, many more alterations to those responses, and then also many more ghosts and many more locations to add much more variety throughout multiple playthroughs of the game and actually making it into something that people would want to play over and over again throughout like the course of owning the game. But overall, that's our experience with Uber. Thank you.